What is up, YouTube? It's Aaron back here with the channel, and today we are on the Bubble number 15. We've got Rahan. Logan is out sick still, so I wanted to give him the week off. And Rahan's about to leave us for 3 weeks to go to Asia to celebrate his marriage. So, how are you, sir?
Celebrate marriage? No. I'm there to go to OCG land because that's where Burst Protocol is, and the only thing I'm excited for now in this game.
Oh my god. Alright, I won't tell your wife that. I know she's mad at me, but she will definitely be mad at you after she hears that. So yeah, for me, life-wise, I was at my friend's wedding, I think almost the same time as yours, or the week after. I had to give a best man speech. Luckily, no one laughed me out of the arena. We got him sent off. He had a nice cruise, and otherwise, yeah, we're just kind of chilling. Yu-Gi-Oh's, for me, is kind of on a hiatus. I've been on the Riftbound grind for a little bit. That game's pretty neat. So we'll hopefully top Houston. Shameless plug, I've been doing Riftbound content on a different channel, so... Other than that, we'll get back to Yu-Gi-Oh! At some point in the near future, but we get to review Bologna. We've got some stats conversations that we'll go over, and then we'll do like a bit of an overall discussion. Rahan's always been looking at Burst Protocol, so he'll give us a little bit of a breakdown of what we're kind of expecting in the coming months. So, let's hop right into it. Yeah. So first of all, we've got the day one breakdown of decks that entered. Obviously, there's 39% that are unaccounted for, but this is a pretty reasonable idea of what to look at. So I think the event was 2450, something around there, entrance. So whatever that pans out to, like 500, just under 500 Draco Tail. And then we see Vanquishable K9 all the way up to 4th place, which now overtakes like Pure Yummy variants, Pure Mitsu variants, Lunalite, which I think it was like the worst kept secret of all time that Vanquishable was obviously very well positioned in the Draco Tail. So yeah, like this was my pick to win the event. I ended up doing so. It was 2 of the top 8 and 11 of the top 64, which I think is honestly like really insane conversion. I doubt it would do that well again. But if these players had a very favorable Swiss with a lot of Draco Tail and whatever, then they're obviously going to perform pretty well. I think Azuna was like a very good call for the weekend. We saw Yummy List playing it. We saw K9 Mitsu. Like K9 overall, I think, was a really, really good call for the weekend, just in terms of how well those cards perform in a Draco Tail. That was my...
Even Draco Tail variants were playing, like, at least Azuna. There was also, like, Mitsu K9 variants that were running around.
Yeah, that was the guy
Yeah, this was definitely, like, Azuna's event to be, like, a breakout card.
Yeah, like... I did a podcast on JF, King of the Road of the... something, I forgot. He does a market watch type stuff. And he was like, what card do you think is like underpriced right now? And I saw the Azuna's price, and I'm like, there's no way this card is worth $12. It was like selling at 40 or 50 initially, and just how good that card is into Draco Tail. I'm like, okay, like this is definitely something that is worth more than it is currently. And then obviously overperformed. Like, I don't know how many of these decks in 64 played it, but when you see Pure Yummy making space for it in the extra deck, like there's probably a good reason for that card to be indexed, right? We'll look at top 8 specifically. So you see 2 Vanquishable, 2 Malice, Pure Yummy, which was in the finals, Pure Mitsu, a Draco Tail, and a Mitsu Yummy. So this is like a pretty substantial fall off from what we saw over the past couple events. Obviously still 10 in top 64, but the conversion was not as strong. I guess just like the preparation for it between your Talioning Sea, and even if you just played a card like Azuna, like being able to threaten Zeus and Typhon and like all those bodies, I think was really, really impactful for the deck. We see Joshua Schmidt performing with the deck, and Juho, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into some of our additional topics. So this was the winning list. We see 2 Lupus, which was an idea that I actually heard about from Santoli originally. It was in my Vanquishable list that I was testing. I don't remember if he was signing the 3rd. He was, yeah. So
Santoli was initially actually the 3rd as well, and I actually really like that idea, just because if you just summon this out, go into Typhon, it just applies so much pressure into the Draco Tail board. And then the issue just became, okay, now it might just be a bit redundant where we're breaking on the 3rd Lupus. So he took it out of his main. But I know this was like definitely a card that a lot of people were discussing at like more than one.
Yeah. And Vanquishable has the additional benefit of just like Holisu being able to put a body on board. The thing that you brought up, like the most important point though, is like this card on its own threatens Typhon, and if people were playing cards like Tyrus, and Valon was like obviously a pretty consistent interrupt that people play it with, but like the Lupus not being able to get Ashed or Belled or whatever, I actually think makes the card like substantially better, like on its own. Just like being able to guarantee that Typhon, and then the other big benefit of Typhon in general is against Yamimitsu, especially if they do whatever combo to where there are not like names on the field that can interact with Lupus, which to be fair can dodge stuff pretty easily. But being able to get to Typhon before they play Mitsurugi in their Yamimitsu deck means that they will not be able to search off the Murakumo, so they're usually going to be missing either Purification or Prayers, which is obviously a pretty noticeable drop off to that end board. And obviously you have the ability to make Typhon and Valen into Draco Tail. I think that the cards are very flexible. Every deck effectively in the meta lost to it to some capacity, or like at least turned it on. So if you're able to like double pair it with like Su or Fua or whatever, then you're in like a really, really winning position, which obviously was shown over the weekend. So this list actually looks more just like a pure K9 deck with like some Vanquishful cards. Like we see 3 Ks for K9, we see the X-Force release, we see 3 Noroi, we see 2 Ripper. And then yeah, obviously the 6 Chummies I think were like a pretty big staple of this type of deck for the tournament. And then we see Inscription and Droll as just I think like the going first options, and additional stuff like Shifter and Lupus, which all just good cards.
I think
out of the ordinary. I'm sorry.
I think for the most part now, for a lot of these couple of YCS I've like gone by in the past couple of months, obviously like me being a bystander not playing these YCS, I've seen a really really big trend of people just playing heavy engine and Mulch armies.
Yeah.
Very rarely now, like perhaps like in like the Malice type decks, will you see like single point negations, but a lot of the decks now I feel like are just playing Mulch armies and engine rather than like small engine 1 card starters, and then just playing like imperm veilers, things like that. I think those kind of have just been like shifted around, and I don't see how those types of cards will be like coming back into the metagame anytime in the future. Both like within like the most recent future, but also after the next set as well. Just from my own insight looking into next sets.
I think Pure Yummy still does the hand trap, like Purge and Imperms and all that. I think you do kind of have to play a Dominus for that strategy to work at this point. Like, the quality of hand traps after the initial, we'll say 4. Like, if you want to include, like, Imperm is whatever, fine. Like, especially now that people are playing Azuna, you can, like, Imperm Zeus. So, like, having that additional utility is not bad. So we have, like, whatever, Ash, Dominus, Imperm. Nib is usually okay when you're playing that many, like, you can pair it. So I think there's enough, but yeah, like you said, like, once you get to, like, Bell is kind of okay against some decks and bad against others. Like, if you go as deep as, like, Valor, then that card's, like, pretty lackluster in a lot of situations. So I agree. Like, this seemed to be the trends, I think, starting around the Pittsburgh time. Like, we saw a lot of just, like, Chummies and Drolls, and there were still some people playing, like, Bells and stuff for Draco Tail, but on average, I think this was... I think it just, like you said, the power level of format is very high. Mitsuyami is not going to fold to any singular point of interaction, so you definitely want to be having something that affects their entire turn. Same for, like, other decks, right? Like, this K9 deck, like, if you Valor Jokul or Valor Noroi, they have one extender, like, they're going to get to Ripper and have an even better board, right? So you kind of have to try and flood them to prevent that from happening in the first place. So
I forget, but, like, was this the case for Nats as well? Like, when we were playing Ryzeal on Alice, was this the case as well? I think people were just, like, relying on, like, Chummies and Drolls and things like that?
100%. Yeah, I mean, like, for my list that I made top 64 with for Automat Ryzo, it was just, I think, Fua, Perulia, Droll, Ash, and then sided whatever else. Like, I think once the power level format gets to, I don't know, like, how to define the level, but, like, a reasonable level, like, those cards are just so strong that there's no reason to not really include them. I guess the power level of just, like, decks that are affected by these, right? Like, the reason why we weren't playing Malice for a while is because they're just, like, Malice with some of the format. When you played against Pure Yummy, okay, you can trade Dark Ruler no more, or Bell into their stuff and, like, be fine. But now that there's hybrid decks and there's bridges and people are much more aware that you can just kind of do other things, like, when you get stopped, then why trade 1-for-1 when they can just keep going? So seems to be kind of an unstoppable trend at this point. I'm not sure if... I mean, it's probably like a design thing at this point. Like, Konami has to consciously choose to limit the power level of everything for this to not be the cycle that has been kind of over the past, whatever, year since Chummies got released, right? Like, I don't see a reasonable end in sight.
Yeah, it's been like that in a lot of the OCG decks that I've been looking at as well, where it's like, at the minimum, they're playing 6 Chummies, or like, 5 Chummies plus Maxi.
Mhm.
And unless they're like you said, unless they're playing like a dominus centric like strategy or dominus compatible deck, it's really just chummy central.
Yeah.
So it's like it'd be interesting to see like when these type of cards like fall out of favor, but I don't think they are gonna anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, like, so if a lot of decks get hit, like, let's say we, I don't know, like, hit Herald, we hit Ripper, like, I'm just giving examples. We hit Red Ransom, then we get to, and, like, Draco Tail, whatever, gets hit in some meaningful way where, like, let's say Mana's at 1, Ketu Rahu at 1, whatever. At that point, there's, like, more identifiable choke points at all of these decks. They do whatever to circumvent bridges. Okay, now we can start trading Ash for 1 engine piece or Valor for 1 engine piece. But under the current just like format, like premise of just like all these decks have the ability to go one into the other, then there's just no reason to go -1, right? Like all the even against like a deck like Pure Yummy, right? Like with Snatchy, like you're just not really doing a meaningful interrupt against that deck ever. So, and I think
So
Yummy's fine, but like you can't hand trap it.
exactly, but and so staying on like the same notion, do you feel like these cards are ever cards that could get on the Forbidden Unlimited list in the future? Because we've seen them decide several games, right? And so we kind of feel like these cards are necessary evil because they kind of circumvent card decks like Mitsuyami from spiraling out of control. But if you look at even decks that are potentially considered like tier two, or potentially like not like YCS winning decks, like the next step down.
Mhm.
Like if these decks were
Yeah.
to go, you look at the next step level of decks. Those decks also get hit a lot by these chummy
Yeah.
cards. You feel like there's going to be a time where perhaps these cards are warranted to go onto the Forbidden Unlimited list, just so every deck is not just 9 chummies in somewhere in their deck.
I would prefer them to just design cards better so that there's more of an incentive to play cards like Imperm and Valor and whatever. Like these are like the newest and best non-engine, and unless they feel like doing more in terms, I mean, like we've got like whatever the Forbidden Crown, I think is the name of it, coming up. That card seems like it's solid. If we have more cards like on that level that are in like the breaker or like one use hand trap variant, then maybe that is an option. But I don't like necessarily hate the chummies. I like that they're only good going second, right? So going first, like you're not able to they're not maxi, which I think is pretty easy. And I don't really hate the gameplay pattern. Like I do like when going first is kind of like hand checked by those cards. Obviously, like Ash is a way to play around it. Like you have Claw by the Grave. Like we're in like a mini maxi mini game at that point. But I like, so when there's 9, I think it's a problem. When it's like just Fua or whatever, and your deck can kind of play around Fua in a meaningful way, that's where like I think those tier 2 and tier 3 decks can shine. Is like whenever Droll's like the best deck in the format or best non-engine in the format. Okay, now these decks that don't lose to Droll, they have some kind of utility. But like when there's so many chummies, every deck is obviously going to get hit by 1, if not 2, if not 3 chummies, right? Like Malice can just hit by all of them at a certain point. So I don't dislike the chummies as a mechanic, but whenever there's 9 of them in every deck, that's when it just kind of feels like maxi too, right? And you're not really like affecting too much.
Right, I agree. And I think like the way like the perspective that I bring in terms of this conversation is more so along the lines of, okay, I don't want it to be a case of where every deck kind of just becomes like cookie cutter, where like there was a point in
Yeah.
the game where every deck was just maining 3 call by or like maining 3 cross out 3 talents. Things
Mhm.
like that, where the deck building kind of just becomes default. Okay, you start with
Yeah.
these 6 and then you add on the rest of your engine.
Yeah, I agree. Like deck building is in general my favorite aspect of card games. And it feels like over the past 2 years, this has been a critique for a while. Like starting probably in around Snake Eye format, where deck building kind of like built itself. There wasn't too much you could do to like gain an edge in that regard. And the non-engine slots in general, like when I do my coaching tests, I'm like, okay, like the top whatever 3 or 4 non-engines are just so much better than the next few that like you have to auto include these and then just kind of like go matchup by matchup and just like build a side deck from there. And then we've seen cards like whatever Gravekeeper's Inscription, which is again just like a floodgate. Like that's a card that is just like very strong in specific situations, but again it's also a flood. So like I don't see as many, and like the good cards in Malice are just like DeFi and Retaliating Sea, right? Like there's way less just like one-off cards. Just like okay, we are at the point, like, I think historically people have been like, oh, we're like just trying to flood each other out, and obviously like there's decks like Crystron Canine that do that, but it feels like all the non-engine choices at this point are all just floodgates to some extent, and that's a pretty unenjoyable player experience. Which is why Draco Tail I think has been so refreshing. Like I think the gameplay that I provide is pretty good. Like it's not actually flooding out of the game in any meaningful way, and I think it's like a relatively healthy deck overall. But it doesn't feel like the decks around it are in the same vein.
Ironically though, it's also the best Chummy deck that we've had, like since the Chummy Switch is. Like it is by far and objectively the best Chummy deck, where Chummies aren't even dead in the actual main deck. You can just turn them into like whatever cards you want, right? Because of our Thalia. So, and it's also the deck that like benefits the most from Chummies just by getting the additional gas and fuel that you need for a card like 5 mana. So it's actually really
probably Vanquishal, but yeah, I agree. Like just as long as you get to 5 mana, same for Vanquishal. Okay, I get to draw Holy Sue, I get to have attributes, whatever. It's all the same thing. So yeah, I would that's a very good point. Just like I want variability in deck building again, and it doesn't feel like that is really something that we see. Obviously, like it's kind of like if we look at the beginning of this format to now, ignoring the ban list, or you can include the ban list. Like there wasn't Mitsuyami, Vanquishal was effectively dead, so like there are changes, but it feels, I'm not sure if it's just like a modern Yu-Gi-Oh thing where information is very available and these changes happen very quickly, so it feels like things are happening more often than they are. But it feels like deck building has been pretty stifled by just how strong a lot of the top end cards are.
Like if you were to not get that ban list, one of the discussions I had with some people that were preparing for Pittsburgh is, okay, we're dealing with all these floodgates, and this is how YCS, I think Indy was it? That was, or it was Anaheim?
Before Pittsburgh was Anaheim.
Anaheim. So I think the reason Anaheim was so full of floodgates was because in terms of hand traps, people were only playing like largely the Chummies and Ash, right? They weren't playing actual hand traps. So from a lot of the people that I was talking to when they were prepping for Pittsburgh, the discussion was, okay, what if we cut down on the Chummies and we played actual hand traps, right? That way we can kind of actually stifle the decks that are not super consistent or resilient, decks like Ryzeal, Ryzeal Onomat, things like that, and actually sort of interrupt them from their win con. Because if you are getting floodgated a lot of the time, and even in, for example, like in Master Duel, one of the reasons why, for example, a deck like Mermill was so successful would be they would just water lock you or statue lock you, or Branded would like puppet lock you. And so it doesn't matter how many cards you have if you actually can't play the game. So it's interesting because if that was the answer to reduce Chummies and actually play proper hand traps, Konami kind of just like, okay, you continue playing these Chummies, we'll actually get rid of the problem for you in terms of like, preventing your deck building from actually changing. So that was an interesting sort of discussion that came up from a lot of people that I was prepping with for Pittsburgh. Okay, as soon as they saw the ban list, they said, okay, we're going to scrap our idea to actually play actual hand traps and just continue with the trend of pairing strong non-engine with cards that draw.
Yeah. I mean, I think I prefer it this way, honestly. I mean, like I said before, like when you play against a deck like Ryzeal, like you're playing all of these hand traps with the hope to God that you stop them from like FTKing you to some extent. So this gameplay pattern is much preferred to what was before. Like when I look at this like breakdown of Top Cut, like I'm not like really disappointed. I'm just disappointed at like how static deck building feels at the moment. So
I think I think the idea that I have in terms of the discussion, it came up more so, and this is more so just bias by seeing some of these feature matches, was when we were looking at, for example, AD's win at Pittsburgh, right? He had Fua going second, like, or like multiple Fuas going second, or like he had Fua, Meow's going second. And I think that just stifles the person going first substantially. And the person who actually just chummies you successfully is just in such a commanding position that, especially with the power ceiling of the current decks in the format, that I think it was really in the favor of the person going second relative to the person going first. So it kind of just becomes like chummies. If you saw chummies, right? But then conversely, like if the person saw chummies and then it got Ash or Callbide, now you're in such a losing position.
Yeah, the game's just like effectively over.
Exactly. So like those type of scenarios, like I'm not a huge fan of, because it kind of becomes super obvious in terms of who's in the commanding position now and who's actually struggling to play the game. Whereas like if you're navigating around like actual interruptions like Veiler, Imperm, cards are like still stifling, your turn, but your
Yep.
opponent is conversely losing card advantage of how many cards they're able to play with into your board. I think that almost felt like more of a fair Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah.
But
I get
again,
it.
the concept of fair Yu-Gi-Oh kind of just is up in the air because of like how powerful these decks are.
Yeah. I mean, when we looked at like the pure Mitsurugi format, right? Like at the beginning of this, what we kind of expected the beginning of this to look like. That's where I think people were playing like the more like fair quote unquote hand traps and trying to play more honest games of Yu-Gi-Oh. And then even in that, like we saw people like just playing blowouts, right? Like we saw Fossil Dyna in the fair decks. Like it wasn't even just in like the unfair decks. So I don't know if there's like a real answer to this. I think it is effectively just like what Konami wants the format to look like in terms of card design and ban list design. So we'll see how things adjust. I dislike the variance that Chummies provide in that regard, but I do also understand that like when Mitsuyomi doesn't get chummied, that deck is just going to FTK you. Like it can do things through draw that are oppressive. It does everything through one or two normal hand traps, right? That like you for but what we've also seen is like at the beginning of the format, chummies weren't required for the deck to function. It's kind of just like a byproduct of how everything is shifted. So if Konami wants to shift the game towards more one-off hand traps being impactful, then chummies are going to fall out of favor because like that's what we all did in the beginning. Like this is a more recent development for us to all be online chummies. So we'll like I would prefer it to not be this way. Like I said, like I want chummies to kind of be like an additional tool to stop combo decks, not just like kind of a requirement to function. Also, like they just reprinted chummies in the 5-day structure deck, so maybe they're kind of content with this as like a sales push. So we'll see if something changes. Like we're kind of expecting a ban list again sometime. I assume like January, February before the 300th, if I had to guess. So we'll take a look around that time and maybe have a more in-depth discussion on that. But I prefer these gameplay patterns to what we had, like let's say a year ago. But I think there's obviously still room to grow and improve. So we can now kind of skim through the rest of this since we've kind of had a pretty in-depth discussion. So we get see Yummy, Fuwa Droll in main, Purge, Imperm. We see Drop It as well. Inscription seems to be one of the defining cards of the weekend, which I didn't actually get to look at all this. This is my first time. I peeked some feature matches here and there, but otherwise. And we see a Zaylee in the extra deck, which kind of interested by. There's no Hayate, so I didn't. This is like a kind of an uncommon inclusion in this list, no?
I think
Light Dark
what I
also
saw
plays
as
Purge. Like this, I'm kind of curious as to what the goal behind this was.
I
Or
think
how
last
often
time
it
I
came
saw
up.
Azalea being played was Triff's list. He's going with Azalea, Hayate.
Yeah, like when you played Hayate as one, you could just go into Kargari and add engage. Because you only played one gauge in engage as well, so I guess he's wanted it for removal. He doesn't play like too many spells for me to expect that to go off, so this seems like a kind of abnormal list. This is kind of like if you wanted to like get like ahead of the curve, quote unquote, where like the curve we anticipated was K9 cards. Now you just go back to playing pure Yummy and like you just take advantage of all those people. So this is probably how this guy performed as well as he did. Because like if this guy's just playing as Yummy Mitsu all weekend, or even like if this is plays against too many Draco Tails, I'm gonna expect it to not like perform too well. But obviously, I guess you have Inscription, you have whatever Droplet Bell, so it's probably not that bad of a matchup. But I would expect Draco Tail to be 50-50 at least against this. So he probably just took advantage of like the K9 heavy decks that were out there on the weekend. So
I agree, and you can always like build to beat Dracotel as well. And given the fact that we got 11 VS K9 in top 64, I think as soon as this type of deck got to top cut, it's just super favored, or I guess well positioned into.
Here's like day two, like you're looking around, you're like seeing all these Vanquishable decks, you're like sick. This is really good for me.
Yeah.
The one observation I will make, and lastly, is didn't play too many additional starters. So only one engage, no Piri Ice map, which I saw the Raiden Trade team play. They were big on that card. So what's this? 11, 12, 13, 14. If you count props, it's 15. It's a really low starter count. So yeah, I'm not sure. Like the math I remember correctly is like 16 that you're looking for, if not 17. So this seems a little low. Obviously, congrats to him. Like I don't think this was a bad call for the weekend. I think Mitsuyomi was definitely on the fall off. So not bad. And then if you know how to play Yummy, where you just like leave Herald on the board indefinitely, like the Draco Tail matchup isn't that bad. Especially when you're playing as many interactions with like 9 ways to turn off the traps plus drop it for flame, so not the worst position. But yeah, the consistency does look like a concern if someone's trying to replicate this list moving forward. Malice, this was I think top 4. This was the highest placing Malice deck, which is something we've seen growing in popularity on online servers, and both in person, we've definitely seen a lot of regional success with the deck. We've seen 2 March here, 3 Allure, 2 Imperm once again, 3 Impulse, GWC and MTP, no TB11 anywhere, so I think I've seen this trend picking up a little bit more where they're not playing TB11 because, oh, like, we're not playing a 1-card combo deck anymore, we're playing Bestials, plus we're playing whatever Allures. This deck looks a hair inconsistent, but that, I mean, it's probably hard to fix that with Mouse at this point. Like, that's just kind of a
I think this is just
thing
something
you're accepting. I'm sorry?
I think it's just something you accept with Mouse at this point. I think, if anything, this looks like the most consistent one that we've seen so far, because this is one is playing like 3 Allures, whereas like a lot of the lists that we've seen, for example, from Pittsburgh and things like that, like they weren't really big on Allure.
It just looked, not playing 3 March here seems insane when, like, not opening a Malice name is a really legitimate concern on your deck.
I think the issue is
also
like,
in this situation. I'm sorry?
I think the issue is, right, if you open like March Hare plus a Bestial, is that combo? No, right? Yeah.
The other concern, I guess, is backup, normal backup. You have to, like, backup plus a Bestial. Because if you go, well, let me think, if you open, like, March Hare plus backup, you just, like, add Wizards, the same thing, I guess, yeah, so. As long as you get to, but you have to have a Malice name for backup to be full combo now, no, because there's no Splash Mage.
Yes.
I guess if you open whatever, Dormouse, White Rabbit, but if you open Chessie plus backup, make Link 1 backup, add Wizard, same thing, so. You're just playing an Ib, which I think we've seen a fair bit of, but not like, I'm sorry?
Sorry, it could also be backup plus Allure as well.
Oh yeah, you just like add a name. Okay, that's fair. And I mean, this is a deck that takes advantage of the chummies to like a pretty real extent, right? Like, you're still gonna end on whatever Red Ransom plus Malice in the Underground plus whatever March Hare, and just have like a lot of bodies in rotation. Like, this is the deck that I think takes the most advantage of the chummy meta. Because, like you said, if this deck is like, if your backup is getting imperm consistently, or like whatever, like your MTP is getting like purged or whatever by pure yummy, you're gonna have substantially less interrupts than if you were playing a different deck. So
I agree.
yeah, I mean,
and
I think it's probably, sorry.
That's the thing, right? Like, that's what we're talking about earlier, where like like you said, it's like it just makes such good use of the chummy meta, because like we're just looking at this list and it doesn't have like the most number of starters, or to get going, it often just requires on like 2-card combos. But if people are playing like actual hand traps, it's very easy to stop like a deck like this now.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably how that pure yummy deck did well, right? Like, if you just like get chummy, but people aren't playing imperm, right? So you're like normal, get food, okay, make guy, snatch a bag, okay, now like I have full yummy combo on your turn, like it doesn't change anything. So yeah, I mean, like, this is probably deck lists that are taking advantage of exactly what we're talking about, and I'm being stubborn and not adjusting to the times. So Kanan Mitsu, this was top 4. This was the gentleman who beat Josh Schmidt on stream. I don't know what this deck is supposed to look like in terms of like ratios. We see 3 Azuna, 2 Jokul, 3 Noroi, 1 Lantern, 1 Lupus, and then 1 case for K9. He is not playing the quick play spell anywhere on the list. Mitsu ratio is full. We see Arm Mouse, we see Futsu, pre-prep, Prost, main deck purification. Yeah, and then side deck is just a bunch of floodgates and an imperm for the mirror, I assume.
So is the bridge for this deck between the 2 engines just like K9s into Saryuja? And then how do you bridge and how do you bridge from Mitsu into K9s?
I don't believe there is a way to do so, which I don't think you need to, honestly. Like, the K9 cards, especially if you're not playing the quick play spell, like, what does an additional rank 5 really provide you? Like, if you're just playing pure Mitsu and just like end on whatever IP plus purification plus Futsu, like, you're probably in a pretty good spot. And the K9 cards are just like an additional, like, going first push, increase your ceiling, and going second, hopefully, like, add an additional layer that people aren't expecting.
I guess, but like, now you're just playing more bricks, right? Like, now your Lantern, now your Lupus is like a break if you're not like bridging the engines. So
Lantern, Lupus, yeah, but like, what were those thoughts going to be in a pure Mitsu deck anyways? Like Veilers or more imperms or like more Mitsu rituals, which don't actually fix any of the like the actual problems in the deck. So I mean, we talked about how strong Lupus is in interrupts, so like that card is effectively a non-engine at this point when you're going first and second. Lantern obviously not ideal, but if you open Lantern plus whatever Azuna, you can just normal it case for Jokul and like still get to plays that way. So I don't think it's like a perfect answer, but I think the K9 cards are a little bit more strong than people probably give them credit for initially, like as their own engine. Obviously there's no 7th attack on this list, which may be something you could look at if you're trying to build this like on your own, but This is definitely more of like a Mitsu deck with Izunas and then like some additional going first cards. Because when you look at the non-engine the format, unless you're just manning chummies in these slots, like what we've been discussing the entire time is like what are we actually going to put in these slots that actually matter? And I don't know if we can think of any real answers. So yeah, that'll I think wrap up the breakdown. Any additional or final thoughts on Bologna?
No, it just seems like kind of what we expected the format to develop into, like a rock paper scissors format. I think if we're looking at next steps, and I think perhaps this could like segue into our discussion for the YCS in Mexico and perhaps like the remote YCS.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we were talking about this before we started this podcast. Is I don't think we expect Vanquish Soul to do amazingly well at like the next few YCSs, just because it's like it's kind of been found out. And if anything, I'd expect Pure Yummy to be on the rise. Pure Yummy, more like even Malice, honestly, like more hand trap center decks to stop the Vanquish Soul deck and just capitalize on the inconsistencies of a deck like that. But I think if you're looking to attend any of those YCSs, you could either make a meta call on like Yummy or Malice, or just stay consistent with Draco Tail. I don't think Draco Tail is going anywhere. It seems like the most stable of like the 3 decks or the top 4 decks. But I think VS is probably something like I would stay away from. It was more so like, you know, a dark horse or like a one event deck, if anything, right now.
Yeah, I would probably agree. The one counter that I have heard is just like, oh, Vanquish Soul, like, what really beats the deck, right? Like, it performs well in the chummies or whatever, but like, you kind of brought it up where the second people start like putting imperms in their deck and now your Star usually doesn't resolve, okay, now we're playing Pure Canine into whatever, a Yummy deck that has whatever non-engine available to it. So I think I would agree. I think Vanquish Soul is a good call for a heavy Draco Tail meta. But if things start dispersing, like you said, like where, I mean, I don't have to dish the whatever. We saw the breakdown, which was pretty Draco Tail heavy. But if that number starts splitting a little bit more and like balancing out where we see more Pure Yummy, maybe Mitsu Yummy comes back in the format to try and take advantage of whatever trends, then now the format gets a little bit more difficult to kind of prep for. And like you said, if Pure Yummy is in the format, how live is your Zuna and how live are all these Vanquishable cards into Book of Moon? So I think at this point I would just play what you're comfortable with, play what you like. You can obviously try to metagame a little bit inside deck, but from what we've seen in a lot of these lists, it's just kind of just like Floodgates and good strong engine. So whatever strong engine you like and are going to play the best with, then I'd probably lean towards that, and then find the best Floodgates for whatever you're kind of anticipating. So not my favorite piece of advice to give, but at the end of the day, I think you should always just kind of play what you're gonna play the best with. Like, especially in formats like this where you look at the pie chart and it's pretty static, and then you look at all of this and there isn't anything that's like a super outlier. We like 10 for Draco Tail, 11 for Vanquished, 8 for Malice, Mitsu Yummy, like all of these are respectable numbers that like whatever you are going to personally play the best, I think is the best option. Sorry, you're good.
I have a thought to pick your brain.
Please.
As someone who does coaching, right?
Sure.
Say you have a student who comes to you. They're prepping for the remote YCS or the YCS in Mexico. And they say, Mr. McInnes, I have a conundrum. I can either metagame and play Pure Yummy or Malice and try to metagame, and because people played a lot of Vanquish Soul for Bologna, and even brought it up at Pittsburgh. So I can try to metagame on these 2 decks. I'm not very comfortable with these 2 decks. I haven't played them, but I can put in time. Or I've been playing Draco Tail for the past 3 months. I know this deck well. I can play it well. Should I continue just playing Draco Tail? So if you're the coach and I'm the student, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I think I kind of just went over it. I was like, I would definitely just lean towards comfort. All these decks are pretty like normal, or not normal, but like there's nothing that stands out. It's like you said, it was kind of like a triangle, call it a square, whatever the fuck. It's a pentagon for all I care. It is in terms of how many viable decks there are, and like it feels like modern Yu-Gi-Oh. We for whatever reason you can point to whatever. There's like matchups are more relevant than they kind of have ever been. Part of it is just how many decks are in the format. Like if obviously there's going to be some kind of interactions that are like valuable or like favored. But yeah, like, unless you're expecting 11 Vanquish Soul in your Swiss, I think Draco Tail performs well enough on average to just kind of do its job consistently. And as long as you, like, okay, I want to prep for Vanquish, so let's put something in our side deck for it. Let's make sure we respect D5 for the Malice deck. How are we going to respect Pure Yummy? Like, we'll figure all that out. But in general, like I said, I'm pretty big on just like whatever you anticipate your best performance coming from, whether it's comfort or whatever. Like, I don't, especially if you're like remote YCS in a week, and I can commit 20 hours to it, I'd say just spend those 20 hours on Draco Tails too. Like, it's not worth trying to re-spend those 20 hours on a different deck, because now you can save 20 hours, you can spend maybe 10 or 15 and like have 5 additional hours to go work out or just like not grind Yu-Gi-Oh like religiously at this point. Like, especially if you're already prepared, I don't think anything is going to be that significant of an edge. I'm not going to like speak with certainty, but I think we're kind of towards the end of the cycle where we're probably going to like loop back towards, like you said, Pure Yummy and maybe Mitsu Yummy a little bit, and then from there Draco Tail will just start eating it into it, and from there the cycle will continue, and eventually Vanquish Soul is just the best deck, as it always is, you know. But yeah, I guess we kind of discussed it a little bit, but we were talking about this beforehand. I'm asking you this question. What are your thoughts on deck conversion as a meaningful stat in analysis?
So I think it's not black and white. I think it definitely provides, it's not like the end all and be all stat. I think it provides you some sort of valuable information, because when we were looking at the day one sort of breakdown, we saw that Vanquish Soul was only a fraction of the room, right? It definitely wasn't up there in double digits for representation, right? It was only 60% of the room. So that's almost a fourth of what Draco Tail was. So, but like for a deck like that to now be the most dominant deck in Top Cut indicates that over, I think what, it was like 14 rounds of Swiss, 15 rounds of Swiss, Vanquish Soul gave people like the most opportunities for success. So I think there's definitely merit to it, because even if you look at like a deck like Lunalight, right? For YCS Pittsburgh, I think there's like very few Lunalights, or even this deck, in this one, there was very few Lunalights, and Lunalight was able to make it to top 64. So I think conversion has its merits, but then you get into the finicky bits, which is, okay, how well a deck converts from the Swiss rounds to Top Cut is not only dependent on the luck of what matchups it faced that run, but also who played it, right? Because if your local's Timmy brings Orcus to an event, and I bring Orcus to an event, right? I could win a YCS with Orcus, right?
Sure.
Little Timmy may not win a YCS with Orcus. So Orcus could be 2% of the room. But does that mean Orcus is like the best deck or the worst deck of the format? I don't think it says much other than that, but perhaps it gives you an indication of how well a deck was perceived to be for an event based on like who played it, but also how well it fared for that event. And I think it's only event specific.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. My stance on it is, I think it's probably like one of the least relevant stats that you could look at. It has, like you said, there's some merits to it. Like, it has expectation attached to it. Like, oh, how many people thought the deck going into an event is going to be good. But once you get towards like the tail end of a tournament, like that's where I think the important stats are, which is like what players played X deck. Like when you look at top 64, who played what deck, and like where are they in like the points race or whatever. Like where are those quality players placing their trust? And obviously we see people perform well. Like we see Joshua Schmidt bring Vanquish Soul, so there's obviously some merit to people who made those decisions. And then obviously we see decks like Draco Tail, just a very good, consistent deck that we've seen have lengths of success. So I think...
But for example, if you're looking at Draco Tail, right? So let's rewind back, go to the top 8 breakdown. Yeah. I think it's actually more interesting because there's only one Draco Tail in top 8, right?
Yeah.
And the player was, I think, Danilo. And Danilo's been grinding event after event. So how much of this was now down to Draco Tail being actually good for the event versus how much of it is down to Danilo actually prepping and actually putting in a performance?
I mean, when you look at the overall conversion, top 64 it as the second highest. Like, I think like there was merit to it, but yes, that is also important. Like when you see people that have success with it consistently, that obviously does affect the weight. Like if we see someone, I think I saw Roselle playing White Forest. Yeah. Yes. Like I'm not gonna think White Forest is now like a good call. I'm gonna think Roselle is very good at the White Forest deck and was able to translate that to a top 64. Like I think that's how those like outliers should be looked at. Like that's where one tricking becomes like a standout and where it performs the best generally. So we have a brief discussion. We don't have to go into in depth, but I'm just gonna like kind of play this in the background. This is the round 15 feature, where they start game 3 with 5 minutes, and the time rules kind of rear their ugly head. And I'll kind of like let you take over from here. What are your thoughts on this situation? I need to speed this up, but
So this was like a very debated situation in the UK community, from what I know.
yes.
A lot of people started like lamenting and like bashing on the player who's currently playing with Dracotail. But from what I heard, people that were actually at Bologna is that he actually tried to scoop, but he scooped after time was called. So that goes into a whole like can of worms of what Konami's rules currently are. Along with the issue of people that are playing on a feature match don't actually have a clock, right? And I think that's such a big issue where like all like you have to continuously be cognizant of the fact that there's like a clock, and then turn to the judge, ask for time. The judge then checks their clock and then tells them back to you. So there's never an instance of like, oh, you can look up, you can see a clock, and you can play accordingly. Especially because the only clocks in the room are always only for the people that are not on stage, so not on the feature match stage. Your clock is entirely different. And then whether or not you have added on time and things like that, I think it's just like a myriad of factors that went into this game specifically. Both the fact that Konami's rules for the time, like time of the round, aren't perfect right now, along with the fact that the feature match doesn't have its own clock that's visible for the players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are all good points. Like when we had Logan, obviously, like Logan, one of our co-hosts, on last time, and he was having his like biggest gripe was when he was on a written feature, and the judge running his clock was like on his phone, and it wasn't as like prompt as it needed to be in terms of like pausing and unpausing. And in this situation, like this is another thing we've talked about in the past, is just like clock accessibility. So I think there's a lot of things that you could discuss with this, but at the end of the day, I think these time rules I'm still like not a big fan of. You can argue, okay, we need to change the time rules to I'm sorry, changing time rules to where you can scoop after the fact. Like there's probably a lot of different things you can do, but I think at the end of it all, I really just dislike the gameplay that is kind of incentivized by this. Obviously, you could look at before where like the life point thing is also very unfavored, and like people are like actively changing their side decks to affect that. But I will say, like, you have some level of agency over this, and in this situation, like I think a lot of your agency is taken away because, okay, I could play out game 2 when I'm up game 1, and maybe have some control over that situation, because of whatever life point manipulation, but if my opponent doesn't scoop game 2 when I'm winning, or whatever game 3 when I'm ahead, then like you have exactly zero agency over that. Like you can't always play the game faster. Like that's where like these Vanquishal Dracotail matchup, like we're starting game 3 45 minutes in, and this is with the additional 5 minutes of time. Where like I think you want this to be Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like you want it to be interactive, you want it to go back and forth. But if like you get punished as a result of this because you didn't finish the entire match, and I didn't watch all of it. Like I'm not sure if someone was at fault time wise, but I just dislike that. Like even the situation where he said Marco he was trying to scoop. Like I don't think he should be put into a position to where like he has to scoop for Juho to make top 8. Like I just
exactly. I think like putting players in a situation where they have to like almost like honor scoop is such an awkward position because you have to recognize, like, okay, so like who's gonna scoop here, right? Like, is it Juhu
exactly.
is required to scoop, or is it Marco? Because Marco's drawing 3 cards off his trap cards. We also don't know what he drew, right? So does he have substantial follow up because Juhu's unable to kill this turn?
Yeah.
So, but he also has a full board established. So a lot of people are saying, oh, Marco should have scooped because Jihu is establishing his board. He's, playing through Marco's board. But Marco's also like drawing cards. He has a substantial amount of follow-up. So would it not be the case where, Jihu actually might need to scoop because Marco has all this follow-up, he's unable to kill, drawing cards and things like that. So it just puts like players in a weird spot where, objectively there is no correct decision of who should be scooping. Obviously, like sometimes like you're out of cards entirely, but I think it just puts the onus on players, and I think that's when you get into like these finicky issues of he said, she said, this person's at fault, this person's not honorable, and it creates issues for the players.
Yeah. And one additional thing I'll add is, and I forgot what it was. Unlucky. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think at this point we're kind of beating a dead horse. Like, we've gone over this a few different weeks at this point, and all kind of expressed how unfun it is and like what it provides to the player experience. I remember it was another thing that I've brought up multiple times. The time rules are not increasing the pace of play for tournament procedure. Like, we are still consistently 15, 20, 25 minutes at a time, and you can obviously blame features for that, but like, if your initial argument was, oh hey, let's like speed up tournaments, and that is not something that we've seen happen, then what are we really gaining? Like, I remember who I was talking to recently, but I brought up how initially I was like, oh, I think I initially disliked the tournament structure changes, and I was like, I'm open to the possibility of these time rules being okay. And I've gone at a complete 180, where like I think the tournament structure is honestly fine and pretty beneficial to a lot of players, but I actively hate the time rules, and I think they've made Yu-Gi-Oh a less enjoyable experience for me personally.
I will say, I think I would still give Konami the benefit of the doubt, just because I also haven't played any of these events, so
Yeah, you'll see.
I'm entirely like without an actual perspective of like how it feels to be in the battlefield. But I think these time rules have only been changed for like a couple of months. I personally would like to give Konami until the end of the season to see what the reception is, and ideally implement these changes for the beginning of next season, just to avoid like confusion and issues like that, because I feel like people are still trying to accommodate and adjust for these time rules. So I personally would want to give Konami until the end of the season, see and iron out any of these issues, and hopefully for next season we get like an actual improvement to these time rules.
I understand that argument. I think when they've been so prompt in fixing things like with the E-ban list and stuff like that, that I would be disappointed if it took them a full year to make those adjustments. Obviously, like, this is not like that's something that is probably fixed easily, but if they've been doing any level of listening to the player base, which obviously that's what this podcast is for and what we've seen on Twitter, like, if they're as attentive to Genesis, like, or half as attentive to Genesis as they are to this, then they'll understand that this is something that I think the general consensus is that this is not okay. I've heard rumors that they are actively looking at it, and this is potential something they could adjust in the future. So we'll see if that's the case. I'd be very like, hearing that is very positive. Unfortunately, it's just taken years of Konami's lack of responsiveness at points. That, like, I'm hopeful for this, but I'm not gonna be holding my breath for the 300 to be under different time rules. So if that's the case, I'll obviously be preparing under the current time rules, and whatever I can do to like make that a fun experience for me, I'm gonna do so. But I generally am very opposed to these rules. Yeah, the last thing before we go, we've always done a fair bit of format discussion. Burhan said he's been looking forward to Burst Protocol. He wanted to give us a brief kind of overview and discussion over how he thinks that set will or unfortunately will not affect us. So, Burhan, take it away for us real quick.
So, I looked into this because my next event and first event of this season is going to be the 300th. So I'm really excited for that. But from what I've seen from Burst Protocol is I think Draco's Hill just becomes actually like the best deck. Because I think right now it's kind of like in contention, or like, okay, maybe it's not the best deck, maybe it's like a top 3, top 2. But the additions of the branded package, the additions of like the Magistus cards, things like that, I think Dracotil just becomes far and away the best deck, and I think you can see it right now from the OCG as well, where it's like almost double in terms of representation of the next best deck, which is Yummy. It's interesting though because like the top 4 decks are almost mimicking the top 4 decks that we have right now. I know people can say like, oh, Vanquish Soul is up there too, but like Vanquish Soul is on this pie chart, and honestly, Vanquish Soul in terms of like for success, it's almost akin to what we've had post ban list for Vanquish Soul here as well. Yeah, so like Aaron, scroll down. This is a lot of like basically what card pools like we have right now. The addition is just like the addition of like the Elbaz of white, I believe it's called, which adds like an extra dimension to the deck because you can bridge in like with Brand Fusion a lot more easily. We also have 2 Brand Fusion relative to like their 1.
They got one
We
cat
also
too as well, and they're performing as well as they are.
exactly, and 1 cut 2 as well. So I think like without a ban list that actually like hurts this deck, even like if it's like a light ban list, like mimics what the OCG did for example for Ketu and things like that. I think this deck still remains like by far the best deck Richmond. We can see like Yami here playing the new Forbidden card, but it's also like very akin to like the Yami that just performed at YCS Bologna. I know that they have Savage in their deck, but I don't really from the games that I've seen in the OCG, it's not really required. But I think like the format honestly does not change with Burst Protocol, and I think half of that reason is because the power level of Burst Protocol actually is not high. The like predominant themes that are included in Burst Protocol are like Exosister, Elven Notes, so like Elven Notes Fiendsmith, Elven Notes Centurion. You have like the Rocket deck, but like none of those decks are putting up anything against like the top four that we have right now. So like Mitsu, Yami, Dracotail, and Malice. So I feel like until these decks actually get a hit, um, I don't think these decks will be going anywhere. I know a lot of the OCG players actually reached out to Shane, who you spoke with the Singapore representative.
Yeah.
And I asked him, what's the situation like with Burst Protocol, and he says people are still figuring things out in the OCG. So notably, it's with like Exosister, and it's with Elven Notes Fiendsmith. Elven Notes Fiendsmith might be a deck that I think is impeded a lot by Maxi over there. So potentially it could get more success over here in the TCG, and it combines really well with the Fiendsmith package, which just kind of has been like cast aside for the past couple of months. Another deck that's been gaining a lot of popularity is the Radiant Typhoon deck, which for us has predominantly seen success in Genesis. But because they gained like a Link 2 along with a non-archetypal like Wind support as well, that deck is kind of the de facto control deck of the format now. And if people want to get, like more of like a Mulcharmy resistant or like a full loss resistant strategy, I think the
Mhm.
Radiant Typhoon deck is something that could rear its head for success. So it's a deck I would watch out for. And if you do have it in Genesis, honestly, I would just like hold on to it because it could just see its limelight in the TCG Advanced format as well. But other than that, I actually don't think Burst Protocol will be affecting much until we get a ban list. And I don't know if honestly we're gonna get a ban list for Richmond because it really depends on like how Konami counts the emergency ban list. If they count it as like, oh, this is part of the cyclical ban list, then I would expect it for like after the 300th, and they probably want to give like these decks like one last chance to shine before they start going after them. So if you have your Dracotail cores, I would just hold on to them because I think Dracotail probably is like the best deck for Richmond if nothing changes.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Because I am not known to look ahead too much when it comes to this type of stuff. I'm generally rather poor when it comes to this type of I don't know what the term is. It's being prepared for the coming months. So yeah, I mean, I think there's like this meta is like fine, but I mean, obviously I want to strive for more, and there's definitely aspects of it that I would like to see improved. So we'll see kind of how they shake it out. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not. Like I said, I'm not holding my breath for it. If we're being honest, if they said, would you rather have a ban list or time rule changes, I would ask for time rule changes over a ban list. So that's kind of where I'm at with my state of things. So yeah, any final thoughts, my friend, before we send you off to the east?
To the OCG land where I can see Burst Protocol and perhaps like build one of these decks.
Yes.
No, this was a really fun podcast because I will be trying to play in my first local event in like a couple of months. I'm gonna bring Pure Orchest to a locals tournament, hopefully win a Switch 2 with a Mario Kart game,
As you should.
and take that to Thailand with me, and then sort of connect with the OCG and see if I can play some Asian English format.
Best of luck with that. Your fiance will definitely be okay with all of that.
Yeah, it is.
Or
It's
sorry,
wife
wife now. Well, wife, I apologize. Dang, she is definitely mad at me. Yeah, I mean, yeah, good luck with that. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I will see you, I guess, like next year, probably, at this point.
I don't know if On the Bubble takes a Christmas break, but if not, then
Well, I know you won't be here. I'll definitely drag Logan around here. We'll definitely do a recap for Merida this weekend. We've got the remote, I think, the week after that, so a couple of events for us to review. But yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Generally takes a bit of a hiatus, so if y'all have any thoughts on topic ideas you would like to see us yap about in the meantime, please feel free to let me know, because your boy is struggling these days on the content machine. So yeah, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next one.